When my brother turned the key in the lock of our family home, the sound was small, just a quiet click. It's funny, isn't it? The sounds that change your life. Not a bang, not a shout, just a little click of a well-oiled lock. I stood on the porch, the plastic container of leftover funeral sandwiches in my hands, and I listened to that click. I didn't pound on the door, I didn't scream. I just stood there, the cold of the evening settling into my bones, and I realized the house I was born in, the house where we had just buried our mother in our hearts, was now closed to me. Forever. If this story hits you, if you know what it feels like when family becomes strangers, then stay with me. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about the quiet heartbreaks and unexpected healings of real life. Your support helps us share these important tales. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Clara. I was the youngest of four, the baby, the one who they always said was too soft for this world. We grew up in that old brick-faced house with the big maple tree in the front yard. Dad planted it the year I was born. He's been gone 20 years now. Mom held the fort, as she called it. She was the roots of that tree, deep and strong, holding us all together even when we scattered. There was Michael, the eldest, serious, responsible, a banker. Then Susan, 2 years younger, a whirlwind of efficiency, a project manager who ran her family like a board meeting. Next was David, the charmer, always with a new scheme that never quite panned out but kept him smiling. And then there was me, Clara. I never moved far. I became a librarian in our town. I liked the quiet, the order of books, the stories that always stayed between their covers, predictable and safe. My life was simple: a small apartment, a cat named Pages, and my weekly visits to Mom. I was the one who took her to doctor's appointments, who fixed her TV remote when it got stuck, who sat with her on Tuesday nights to watch her favorite cooking shows. My siblings, they loved her, of course they did, but it was long-distance love, phone calls on Sundays, visits on holidays, gifts ordered online. They were busy building their lives in bigger cities with important jobs and growing families. I understood. I never kept score. Not then. Mom's health began to slip 2 years ago, a gentle then not so gentle decline. The Tuesday night shows turned into me staying over, helping her to bed. The doctor's visits became more frequent. I'd call Michael, Susan, David. Mom's okay, I'd say. Just a little weaker, we're managing. And we were, me and Mom. The calls from my siblings were always the same. You're a saint, Clara. We don't know what we'd do without you. Is there money for a nurse? Let us know. They sent money sometimes. It helped, but they didn't send time. That was the currency I was spending day by day, and I spent it gladly. She was my mom. But in quiet moments, a tiny, ugly thought would whisper. It whispered when I was exhausted, cancelling plans with my own few friends for the 3rd time. It whispered when I heard David laughing on a phone call from a beach vacation. Do they even see what's happening here? Do they see me? I'd swat the thought away. This wasn't about them. This was about Mom. The end, when it came, was peaceful. She went in her sleep in her own bed in the room that had been hers for 50 years. I found her in the morning. The first call I made wasn't to 911. I knew. I sat with her, holding her still warm hand, for a long time before I picked up the phone. Then I called my brothers and sister. Their grief was loud, immediate, full of travel plans and shocked exclamations. Mine was silent, a deep, hollowed-out space inside me that had been filling with dread for months and was now just empty. I handled the funeral arrangements. They asked me to. You know what she would have wanted, Clara. You were here. So I chose the flowers, the hymns, the photo for the program, a picture of her laughing in her garden before the illness. The day of the funeral was a blur of dark clothes and soft voices. People hugged me and said, "You were such a wonderful daughter. She relied on you so much." They hugged my siblings and said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." The difference was so small, but I heard it. I was the caretaker. They were the bereaved. We all went back to the house afterwards. The neighbours had brought food, plates of cold cuts, baskets of rolls, trays of cookies, and those little sandwiches, the crusts cut off. The house was full of people, the murmur of conversation, the clink of cups. Michael, Susan, and David moved through the crowd together, a united trio, accepting condolences. I was in the kitchen, refilling the coffee pot, wrapping up food. It felt familiar. This was my role here now, the helper. As the last guest left, Susan let out a long sigh. "Well," she said, looking around at the messy living room, "I suppose we should start thinking about all of this." I nodded, wiping the counter. "There's no rush. We can take our time, sort through her things when it feels right." Michael cleared his throat. He had that look, the one he used to have when we were kids, and he was about to lay down a law Dad had given him. "Actually, Clara, we need to talk. Let's sit down." A little knot tightened in my stomach. We gathered in the living room, the four of us, surrounded by the ghosts of the afternoon. I sat in Mom's armchair without even thinking. Susan glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "We've been talking," Michael began, his voice smooth, banker-like, "about the house, the estate." I nodded slowly. "Okay." David leaned forward, his smile gentle, trying to soften the blow before it even landed. "Clara, you've done so much, more than anyone could have asked for. Really, we're all so grateful." The knot got tighter. Gratitude. It was starting to sound like a goodbye. "The thing is," Susan continued, her voice brisk, "managing an estate from 3 different cities is a nightmare. It's not practical. The market is good right now. We think the smartest thing, the only sensible thing, is to sell the house. Quickly." The words hung in the air. Sell the house, my home, the maple tree outside the window, Mom's rose bushes, the kitchen where she taught me to bake. "Sell it," my voice came out a whisper. "It's just a house, Clara," David said softly. "Mom's gone, the memories aren't in the walls." But they were, for me they were, in the scratch on the doorframe where we measured our height every year, in the stain on the carpet from when Michael spilled grape juice, in the window seat where I read 1,000 books. What about her things?" I asked. "Her photos, her china, Dad's old toolbox." "We'll have an estate sale," Susan said, as if she was scheduling a conference call. "Whatever we don't want, we sell. We split the proceeds from the house and the sale 4 ways. It's clean, it's fair." 4 ways, the math was fair, but nothing else was. I swallowed. "I don't want to sell it." The silence was heavy. Michael adjusted his tie. "Clara, be realistic. You can't afford the mortgage on a librarian's salary, and the upkeep on this old place." "I live in an apartment," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "My rent is almost what a mortgage would be. I could live here. I could take care of it." Susan gave a short, humorless laugh. "And then what? We just give you our share of the inheritance. That's not fair to us, Clara, to our families. We have kids' college funds to think about." It felt like a slap. Our families, as if I wasn't part of the family, as if my life, quiet and small, was less important than theirs. "I'm not asking for a gift," I said, heat rising to my cheeks. "We could get the house appraised. I could get a mortgage, buy out your shares over time maybe." "Complicated," Michael said, shaking his head. "Messy, and a financial strain on you. We've made a decision. We're putting it on the market next week. A realtor is coming Monday." Next week, so fast, like erasing a blackboard. "You've made a decision." I looked at each of them. Their faces were set a united front, all of you together. David couldn't meet my eyes. He studied the pattern on the rug. "It's for the best, sis, really." In that moment I saw it. They'd had this conversation, probably on a group call I wasn't part of. They decided the fate of my home, of my heart without me. The baby, the soft one, the one who was here doing the work while they built their lives elsewhere. And now that the work was done, I was being managed, like a minor detail in the estate. I felt a surge of something bitter and dark. But I am my mother's daughter. I don't make scenes, I just go quiet. "I see," I said, standing up. My legs felt weak. "I need some air." I walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking. I needed to do something, anything. I started mechanically packing the leftover food into containers. Someone had to do it. It might as well be me, one last time. A few minutes later I heard them in the hallway murmuring. Then the sound of the front door opening. Were they all leaving me here? I walked out of the kitchen, a container of sandwiches in my hand. "Are you going?" I asked. Michael was at the door, his coat on. Susan and David were behind him. "We're going back to the hotel," Michael said. "We're all exhausted. We'll meet tomorrow to start going through paperwork." "Lock up when you leave, Clara," Susan said, pulling on her gloves. And that's when it happened. I took a step towards the door, maybe to see them out, maybe to plead one more time. I'm not sure. But as I passed the threshold, Michael's hand went to the door. He gave me that same serious look. "We'll take the key now, Clara," he said, his voice flat. "The realtor will need it." I froze. "My key?" "It's the house key," Susan said, as if explaining something to a child. "It belongs to the estate now, not to any one of us individually." I looked at David. He stared at his shoes. I had a ring of keys in my purse. The key to this house, the key to my apartment, the key to the library back door. One key, the oldest one, the one with the worn brass head, had been mine since I was 16. Slowly, feeling like I was moving underwater, I walked to my purse and took out the key ring. My fingers fumbled, cold and clumsy. I tried to slide the house key off the ring, but my hands were shaking too much. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Clara," Susan said, an edge of impatience in her voice. She took the whole key ring from my hand, deftly removed the house key and dropped the rest back into my palm. "There." She handed the key to Michael. He slipped it into his pocket. "We'll see you tomorrow," he said. "We'll meet at the lawyer's office at 10. The address is on the card I gave you." They filed out onto the porch. I stood in the doorway, the chill evening air washing over me. I still had the stupid container of sandwiches in my hand. Michael turned. He looked at me standing in the doorway of our family home, and a flicker of something passed over his face. Was it pity, embarrassment? Then it was gone. "You should go home and get some rest," he said, and then he closed the door. I heard the click. That small, final sound. I stood there for a full minute, maybe more, waiting for the door to swing back open, for David to come out with an apology, for someone to say it was a mistake, a joke in terrible taste. But the door stayed shut, and through the frosted glass of the sidelight, I saw their shadowy figures walk down the path, get into their rental car and drive away. They had locked me out of the house, out of the decision, out of the family. I looked down at the container in my hands, egg salad and cucumber, Mom's favorite. I placed it carefully on the porch swing. Then I walked to my car, got in and drove to my empty apartment. I didn't cry, not then, I just felt numb. The hollow space inside me had just gotten bigger and colder. The silence in my apartment that night was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of my own space. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Pages, my cat, curled in my lap purring, but I couldn't feel any warmth. I just sat on my couch, staring at the wall, replaying that little click over and over in my mind. It felt like a dream, a bad, ridiculous dream, my own brothers and sister, the people I'd shared Christmases and birthdays with, the ones who'd signed my cast when I broke my arm at 8, who'd teased me about my first boyfriend. They had looked me in the eye and taken the key to our home, not just Mom's house, ours, the place where we'd all been children, and they'd locked me out. I thought about calling one of them, maybe David. He was the softest, the charmer, he'd always been able to smooth things over, but my phone felt like a brick in my hand. What would I say? "You locked me out, please give the key back." It sounded so childish. And the part of me that was deeply, terribly hurt knew that if I called, I would cry, I would beg, and I couldn't give them that, not now. The numbness was all that was holding me together. The next morning I woke up with a jolt at 7 a.m., my body still on the schedule of getting to Mom's to help her with breakfast. For a few blessed seconds it was a normal day. Then the memory crashed down. The funeral, the conversation, the click, and the meeting at the lawyer, at 10. I dragged myself out of bed. I put on a simple, plain dress. Armor, I thought I needed armor. At 5 minutes to 10, I stood outside a sleek modern law office in a part of town I rarely visited. Michael, Susan, and David were already in the small conference room, each with a paper cup of water in front of them. They looked up when I entered. There were no good mornings, just nods. I took the empty seat at the end of the table, farthest from them. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Evans with a sharp suit and an even sharper smile, began. He passed around copies of the will. Mom's will, it was simple. Everything, the house, her savings, her personal belongings, was to be divided equally among her 4 children. Per stirps, he said, a term I vaguely understood. Equal shares. "Now," Mr. Evans said, folding his hands, "I understand you've already discussed the disposition of the major asset, the house on Maple Street." "Yes," Michael said, his voice firm. "We've agreed to sell. We want to list it as soon as possible." Mr. Evans nodded, making a note. "And the personal effects?" Susan spoke up. "We'll have an estate sale company handle it. We'll each take any specific mementos we want first, of course, but the goal is liquidation, efficiency." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Liquidation, efficiency, her life reduced to these words. Her embroidered handkerchiefs, Dad's old fishing rods, the set of china we only used on Christmas, all laid out for strangers to pick over and haggle over. "I'd like to go through her things myself," I said, my voice thin but clear in the quiet room. "Before any sale, there are items, photos, letters that need to be looked at. They might not have monetary value, but they have family value." Susan sighed, a short, impatient sound. "Clara, that could take weeks. We have jobs, families. We can't all camp out in the house sifting through every old paper." "Then let me do it," I said, looking directly at Mr. Evans, avoiding their eyes. I live here, I can do it. I'll box everything up. You can tell me what you want me to look for. I'll send you photos of anything important. Michael and Susan exchanged a glance. It was a look I was starting to recognize, a silent conversation between the decision-makers. That's very generous of you, Clara, Michael said, not sounding like he thought it was generous at all. It sounded like he thought it was a complication. But we'd need access, to supervise, to ensure everything is handled correctly. You have the key, I said quietly. The words hung in the air, a reminder of the previous night's betrayal. David finally spoke, his voice low. Maybe Clara has a point, she knows the house, she knows what's there. It would save us a lot of time and hassle. Susan shot him a look that silenced him. It's a liability issue, she said, turning back to the lawyer. If she's in the house alone and something happens, or if there's a dispute later about what was found. Mr. Evans cleared his throat, a practiced, neutral sound. We can establish a protocol. Ms. Clara can be allowed supervised access at agreed-upon times to sort and catalogue. An inventory list can be created and signed off by all parties. That protects everyone's interests. Supervised access, like I was a cleaner or a potential thief, not a daughter, not a sister. I felt a hot prickling behind my eyes. I looked down at the polished table, blinking hard. Do not cry in front of them. Fine, I whispered. The rest of the meeting was a blur of documents, schedules, and decisions made without me. The house would be listed in 3 days. The estate sale company would be contacted tomorrow. My supervised access was set for the following afternoon. Michael would be the supervisor. When we walked out of the office, the bright sunlight felt offensive. How could the world be so normal? Clara, David said, touching my arm lightly as we reached the parking lot. About last night taking the key. It wasn't personal, it's just procedure. I looked at him, his face was sincere, etched with worry. He wanted me to absolve him, to say it was okay. But it wasn't personal. Taking the key to my home, locking me out of the place where I'd cared for our dying mother. What could be more personal? It felt personal, I said, pulling my arm away gently. I got into my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror I saw the 3 of them standing together, talking, a tight little circle. The next 24 hours were agony. I drove past the house 3 times. I could see a for sale sign being hammered into the front yard by a man in a bright jacket. It was like watching a stake being driven into the heart of something living. I saw Michael's car there once. He was probably letting the realtor in. I imagined strangers walking through the rooms, judging the worn carpets, the outdated kitchen, talking about potential and renovation costs. They wouldn't see the history in those walls, they'd just see square footage. Finally, it was time for my supervised access. I pulled up and Michael's car was already there. He was waiting on the porch looking at his watch. He had another key now, a shiny new one from the realtor. He gave me a tight smile as I approached. Afternoon, let's try to be efficient, okay? I have a conference call at 4. He unlocked the door, that same familiar sound, but now it was him turning the lock and pushed it open. Stepping inside without being able to just walk in was one of the strangest, most painful sensations of my life. I was a guest, a trespasser in my own memories. The house already felt different, colder, emptier, some of the smaller knickknacks were gone. Realtor said to declutter, Michael said, following my gaze. Susan and I boxed up some of the obvious stuff yesterday. He had been here with Susan, without me, going through Mom's things. Where are the boxes? I asked, my throat tight. In the garage. I walked slowly into the living room. The air still held a faint trace of Mom's perfume, mixed with the smell of lemon polish. I could see the faint indentation in the carpet where her chair had been. I walked over to the bookshelf, the one filled with photo albums and old novels. I reached for a particular album, the one with the faded blue cover. Clara, we really need to focus on the practical items first, Michael said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Jewelry, important papers, silverware, the sentimental stuff can wait. This is important, I said, pulling the album down. I opened it. The first picture was of all of us lined up on the front steps. I was about 5, missing a front tooth. David had his arm around me. Susan was making a silly face. Michael stood straight and tall like a little soldier. Dad had his hand on Mom's shoulder. We were all smiling. Look, I said, holding it out to him, my voice cracking. Look at us. Michael glanced at the photo, then looked back at his phone, tapping out a message. It's a nice picture. You can keep that album if you want. Now let's start in her bedroom. The jewelry box is there. He walked towards the stairs. I stood there, holding the weight of our childhood in my hands, feeling utterly foolish. He didn't want to remember. Remembering made this harder. Remembering reminded him that the efficient, businesslike man he was being had once been that little boy on the steps. The next 2 hours were a special kind of torture. Michael followed me from room to room, a clipboard in hand, making notes. I would pick up an item, a china figurine of a bird Mom loved, Dad's old pocket watch, and he would say estate sale, or that might have some value, set it aside for appraisal. It was a dissection, a cataloguing of a life into columns of profit and loss. In Mom's bedroom, I opened her jewelry box. It wasn't fancy, mostly costume jewelry, a few nice pieces from Dad. My fingers found her wedding ring, a simple gold band worn thin. I held it in my palm, feeling its cool, smooth surface. That should be appraised, Michael said, looking over my shoulder. I want this, I said, closing my fingers around it. We all get to choose some mementos, Clara, but items of significant value need to be accounted for in the final division. You can have it, but its value will be deducted from your share of the estate. I stared at him. He was talking about our mother's wedding ring as if it was a stock option. I thought of the thousands of dollars they'd sent for Mom's care, the implication always being that it was my payment for being there. And now, her ring had a price tag. Keep it, I said, my voice hollow. I dropped the ring back into the box. It landed with a soft clink. Put it in the appraisal pile. He made a note on his clipboard. As we were finishing up, I wandered into the kitchen one last time. On the windowsill over the sink was a small terracotta pot with a scraggly basil plant in it. Mom loved fresh basil. This one was nearly dead, wilted from lack of water in the past week. Without thinking, I went to the sink, filled a glass and watered it. What are you doing? Michael asked from the doorway. It's alive, I said softly, touching a limp leaf. It just needs care. Clara, the house is being sold. The new owners will tear that out, or it'll be dead by closing. It's just a plant. Just a plant, just a house, just a key. I put the glass down. I'm done here, I said. I walked out of the kitchen, past him and out the front door. I didn't look back. He called after me something about signing the inventory list, but I kept walking. I got into my car and this time the tears came. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for Mom. I cried for the house. I cried for the brother on the front steps who would now only talk to me about deductions and liability. I had thought the lockout was the worst of it, but I was wrong. This was worse. This cold, systematic dismantling of our family, of our history, with my brother as the foreman. The conflict wasn't a loud, dramatic fight. It was this quiet, relentless erosion of everything I held dear, carried out with spreadsheets and a clipboard, and I was powerless to stop it. The numbness returned after that day, thicker than before. It was the only way I could function. I went to work at the library, the quiet order of the books a soothing lie. I checked books in and out, helped children find stories about dragons and friendships, and all the while a silent movie played in my head. The click of the lock, Michael's clipboard, the for sale sign standing sentinel in the yard like a flag of conquest. My siblings tried to contact me, or David did. He called twice, left voicemails that were just long sighs and, "Hey Clara, call me back, okay? We should talk." Susan sent a group text about the estate sale date. Michael emailed a PDF of the preliminary listing agreement for me to review and sign. I ignored them all. What was there to say? The machinery they had set in motion was grinding forward, and I was just a piece of grit in the gears, soon to be spat out. Then, a week after my supervised visit, the envelope arrived. It was thick, official, with the lawyer's name in the corner. My heart did a sickening little flip. I opened it with trembling hands at my kitchen table, pages weaving around my ankles. It wasn't a legal summons, it was an inventory. A 20-page list typed and single-spaced of items from the house. Contents of main bedroom closet, contents of china cabinet, assorted linens hall closet. Next to many items was a handwritten note in blue pen, "See to keep or appraise," Michael's handwriting. And at the back, on a separate sheet, was a short list titled Memento Selections. Michael, father's wristwatch, brass desk lamp from study. Susan, mother's pearl necklace, silver gravy boat. David, father's old guitar, collection of vintage maps. Clara, photo albums 4, set of glassware kitchen. I stared at my list, photo albums and glassware. They had decided for me. They had looked at that house at a lifetime of memories and decided that 4 photo albums and some old drinking glasses were what Clara would want. What Clara should want. The simplicity of it, the absolute failure to see me, was breathtaking. And then I saw it. At the very bottom of the memento list in tiny letters, as if it was an afterthought someone had almost forgotten to include. Basil plant, kitchen windowsill. They had put my mother's nearly dead basil plant on the official inventory. They were giving it to me, as my memento, a dying plant they thought I was silly for watering. That was the moment the numbness shattered. It didn't shatter into anger, not the hot, shouting kind. It shattered into a cold, clear and devastating realization. This wasn't just about greed or insensitivity. This was about erasure. My role as the caretaker was over, and so my connection to our family, to its history, was being neatly packaged and filed away. I was being given my allotted sentimental tokens, the photo albums for the past, the glassware for utility, the dying plant as a symbol of my sentimental foolishness, and then I was expected to disappear quietly. I picked up the inventory list, I looked at their selections: Dad's watch, Mom's pearls, the guitar, items of clear, unambiguous value. They were claiming the heirlooms, the tangible pieces of our parents' legacy, and they were leaving me with the shadows. A quiet strength born of pure sorrow settled in my bones. I would not disappear, and I would not accept their version of this story. I didn't call David back. I didn't reply to Susan's text. I went to the lawyer's office alone without an appointment. His receptionist looked startled, but Mr. Evans agreed to see me for a few minutes. He looked at me across his wide desk, his expression professionally neutral. "Ms. Clara, how can I help you?" I placed the inventory list on his desk. "This memento list," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I don't agree with it." "These are usually matters for families to decide amongst themselves," he said gently. "There is no amongst ourselves," I said. "This was decided for me by them. I want to make my own selections." He steepled his fingers. "The process your siblings have proposed is the most efficient way to avoid conflict and expense. If everyone begins making individual claims, it can become quite protracted." "I understand," I said, "but I was my mother's primary caregiver for the last 2 years of her life. I was in that house nearly every day. I know what is there, I know what mattered to her, and I am not agreeing to this list." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not sympathy precisely, but a recognition of resolve. He was a man who dealt in facts, in actions. My calm statement was an action. "What would you propose?" he asked. "I want to submit my own list of items I wish to be excluded from the estate sale and reserved for me. I am not asking for more than my 1/4 share of the value. You can have everything appraised. The value of the items I choose can be deducted from my portion of the proceeds from the house and the sale. If my selections exceed my share, I will pay the difference, but I will choose." I had rehearsed this on the drive over. I sounded like one of them for a moment, talking about shares and deductions, but it was the only language they and he seemed to understand. Mr. Evans was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That is a fair and legally sound proposal. It will require a formal addendum to the estate agreement, signed by all parties, and a full, independent appraisal." "I'll pay for my half of the appraisal," I said quickly. "Very well," he said. He took a legal pad. "Write your list here, be as specific as you can." My hand didn't shake as I picked up the pen. I didn't think of monetary value. I thought of love, I thought of story. I wrote. 1. The writing desk from the living room, the one Mother wrote her letters at. 2. Father's complete set of woodworking tools in the garage workshop. *3. The hand-stitched quilt from the guest bed made by grandmother. 4. All family photograph albums and loose photographs, estimated 12 albums, 3 boxes. 5. Mother's collection of cookbooks, with her handwritten notes in the margins. 6. The set of 6 landscape paintings in the hallway, painted by Aunt June. 7. The ceramic cookie jar shaped like a hen, from the kitchen. 8. The bundle of letters tied with ribbon, in the bottom drawer of the writing desk. 9. The basil plant from the kitchen windowsill. I handed him the list. He read it, his face impassive. None of these things, except perhaps the tools, would be considered highly valuable, but they were the soul of the house. The desk where Mom wrote to us when we were away, the tools Dad used to build our treehouse, the quilt that warmed every sick child, The paintings by her lonely artistic sister that Mom always displayed with pride. The cookie jar we raided as kids. The love letters between my parents I'd never read but knew existed. And the plant, the silly, dying plant that was the last living thing she tended. I will draft the addendum and send it to your siblings for review, Mr. Evans said. I must warn you they may not agree. I know, I said, standing up. Thank you for your time. The storm came as I knew it would. It didn't come as a phone call. It came as a trio of emails, all sent within minutes of each other, replying to Mr. Evans's forwarded proposal. From Michael, this is highly irregular and disruptive. The tools alone require a specialist appraisal. The desk is a major piece of furniture. This will delay the sale by weeks. I strongly advise against this emotional approach. From Susan, the quilt is an antique. The paintings are part of the home staging. Removing these items now will negatively impact the sale price. Clara, this is incredibly selfish. We all loved Mom. You don't get to claim her memory as yours alone. From David, Clara, the cookie jar. Really, can't we just talk about this? I read them, and for the first time I didn't feel hurt. I felt a sad, distant pity. They could only see disruption, cost, and staging. They couldn't see that I was trying to save the heartbeat of our family from being auctioned off to the highest bidder. I wrote one email back, copying everyone including Mr. Evans. Michael, Susan, David. This is not an emotional approach. It is a legal one, as Mr. Evans can confirm. I am claiming items that fall within the fair value of my share of our inheritance. I have offered to pay for any difference. The appraiser can determine the value of the tools, the quilt, the paintings. If you wish to claim items of equivalent sentimental value to you, you are free to do the same. This is not about who loved Mom more. It is about each of us having the right to remember her in our own way. I will not sign any agreement that does not include this addendum. Clara. The silence that followed was louder than their emails. It was the sound of a new balance of power, shaky and fragile, being established. I had stopped being the passive, soft younger sister. I had drawn a line in the sand of our childhood home, and I would not cross back over it. 2 days later, Mr. Evans called. They've agreed, he said, his voice carrying a note of what might have been respect. With the condition that the appraisal happens immediately and that any items you remove are done so before the next open house. Agreed, I said. The victory felt hollow, but it was a victory nonetheless. I had won the right to grieve on my own terms, to salvage the pieces of my heart from the shipwreck they were so eager to tow away. The day of the appraisal was another supervised affair. This time all 4 of us were there, plus a brisk, no-nonsense woman with a tablet who tagged and photographed everything. The atmosphere was icy. Susan wouldn't look at me. Michael spoke only to the appraiser. David hovered, looking miserable. When the appraiser tagged the old ceramic cookie jar, Susan snorted softly. $1 at a garage sale, she muttered, not quite under her breath. The appraiser heard her. She turned the jar over, looked at the bottom. Mid-century studio piece, not hugely valuable but to the right collector, she tapped on her tablet. I'll list it at $80. Susan's cheeks flushed. I said nothing. I just watched as a small white tag was tied to the hen's neck. Finally we got to the kitchen. The appraiser looked at the wilted basil plant in its cheap terracotta pot. She raised an eyebrow, then looked at her list. Basil plant, 1 item. She took a picture. Nominal value, $1. She didn't even tag it. Michael looked at me, and for a second I saw it. Not anger. Confusion. He genuinely could not understand why I was causing all this trouble, spending my own inheritance for a $1 dying plant. And in that moment I finally understood him. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who had turned his heart into a spreadsheet to cope with the loss of his mother. Sentiment was a liability. Love was an inefficient variable. My insistence on these items wasn't just inconvenient to him, it was a rejection of his entire way of surviving the world. I felt a pang of sorrow for the brother he used to be. As we were leaving, the appraiser gone, we stood in the empty living room one last time. The house was just a shell now, waiting for new people to fill it with their own dreams and arguments. David broke the silence. So that's it then. The sale proceeds will be distributed once the paperwork is final, Michael said, adjusting his cufflinks. A statement, not a conversation. I looked at each of them, these strangers who shared my blood and my history. The turning point had passed. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or a shouted secret. It was a quiet, firm no spoken in a lawyer's office. It was the list. It was claiming the cookie jar. It was refusing to be erased. Goodbye, I said softly, not to them but to the house, to the ghost of my mother in the doorway, to the childhood that was truly, finally over. I walked out. I didn't have a key to lock the door behind me. Michael did. I heard it click shut as I walked to my car. But this time the sound didn't hurt as much. I was no longer locked out. I had walked out on my own terms, carrying my pieces of home with me in my heart, soon to be in my hands. The battle was over. The war for my place in the family memory was, if not won, at least fought to a draw. Now came the hard part, learning to live with the quiet aftermath. The physical objects arrived at my apartment over the course of a week. The desk, the tools, the quilt, the paintings, they came in a small moving van arranged by the estate sale company. The driver and his partner were kind, careful men. They placed the writing desk by my living room window, exactly where the light fell like it had in the old house. Nice piece, one of them said, running a hand over the smooth, worn wood. Feels like it has stories. It does, I said, my throat tight. Thank you. The photo albums and cookbooks came in my own car, box by box. I stacked them in my spare room, which was now becoming an archive of a life, 2 lives, really, my parents'. The cookie jar found a place on my kitchen counter. I put the bundle of letters, still tied with their faded ribbon, in the top drawer of the writing desk. I wasn't ready to read them yet. And the basil plant sat on my own kitchen windowsill. It was looking worse, if that was possible. Its stems were brown and brittle, but I watered it, faithfully, every morning. It felt like a duty, a last promise to Mom. The money from the sale came through. My share, after the deductions for the items I'd claimed, was a direct deposit into my bank account. I stared at the number on the screen. It was more money than I'd ever had at once. It felt cold. Blood money, a part of me whispered. Payment for my childhood home, for my years of care. For the loss of my family, I transferred a large chunk of it into a savings account and tried to forget it was there. Life settled into a new, lonelier rhythm. Work, home, pages. The silence in my apartment was now punctuated by these new old things. I'd catch sight of my father's toolbox in the corner and remember the smell of sawdust. I'd wrap myself in my grandmother's quilt on the couch and feel a warmth that wasn't just physical. The paintings by Aunt June, which my siblings had deemed unremarkable, brought a soft, pastoral peace to my walls. They had been right about one thing: these items didn't have high monetary value. Their value was in the quiet way they rebuilt a sense of home around me, brick by memory brick. I heard nothing from Michael or Susan. It was as if I had ceased to exist. From David there were occasional, tentative text messages. Hope you're doing okay. Saw a bird feeder like Mom's and thought of you. I never knew how to answer. A simple thanks felt insufficient. A longer reply felt too dangerous, like poking at a wound that was just starting to scar over. The real healing began, oddly enough, with the basil plant. One Saturday morning, weeks after it had come to live with me, I was watering it as usual, talking to it absently the way Mom used to talk to her plants. Come on, little guy, you can do it. And as the water soaked into the dry soil, I saw it. At the very base of the dead-looking stems, almost hidden, was a tiny, bright green shoot. A new leaf, unfurling with stubborn, impossible life. I burst into tears, not sad tears, tears of sheer, overwhelming wonder. This plant, this $1 nominal value, silly little thing, had held on. It had waited in the dark, perished soil, and when it found a little consistency, a little care, it fought its way back. It felt like a message, the most cliched message in the world perhaps, but in that moment it was a profound truth spoken directly to my soul. Life persists, love persists, even when it seems completely buried. That afternoon I finally opened the drawer of the writing desk. I took out the bundle of letters. I untied the ribbon, its colour bleached by time. The letters were from my father to my mother, written in the first year of their marriage when his job had taken him away for 2 months. His handwriting was bold and sloping, so different from Mom's neat script. I read them one by one, sitting at the desk by the window. They weren't poetic, they weren't full of grand declarations, they were simple day-to-day accounts. The food here is terrible, I miss your cooking. I bought a postcard of the lake, it's pretty but not as pretty as you. I found a bookstore and thought of you, I hope you're not lonely. Only 3 more weeks and I'll be home, I count the hours. In between the lines of mundane detail was a love so steady, so foundational, it took my breath away. It was the love that had built our family. The love that had created the home we had just torn apart. It was a love of constancy, of small promises kept, of missing someone and counting the hours until you could see them again. I thought of my siblings. I thought of the locked door, the clipboard, the emails about disruption. We had forgotten this language. We had traded constancy for efficiency, promises for proceeds. We had stopped counting the hours for each other a long, long time ago. For the first time, my anger towards them truly began to melt, not into friendship, but into a deep, aching sadness. We weren't villains. We were just broken children who had forgotten how to speak our parents' language of love. Michael with his spreadsheets, Susan with her timelines, David with his appeasing smiles. They were all just flawed, hurt people trying to manage the unmanageable pain of loss in the only way they knew how. And so was I, with my silent tears and my stubborn list. A few days later, I was in the library, reshelving books in the history section, when I saw him, David. He was standing by the new arrivals rack, turning a book over in his hands. He looked older, tired. He hadn't seen me. My first instinct was to duck into the stacks, to avoid the awkwardness, the potential for more pain, but the image of that tiny green basil shoot flashed in my mind. Life persists. I took a breath and walked over, looking for anything in particular. He jumped, startled. "Clara, oh, I know, just killing time." He put the book back. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we couldn't say. "How are you?" he finally asked, his eyes searching my face. "I'm okay," I said. It was mostly true. "Getting there, how are you?" "Yeah, okay." He scuffed his shoe on the carpet. "Listen, Clara, about everything. I'm really sorry. I was a coward. I knew what Michael and Susan were doing was harsh. But I just went along. I didn't want to rock the boat. I hate conflict." "I know," I said softly. "I know you do. It wasn't right, locking you out, the whole procedure of it all. It felt wrong in my gut, but I signed the papers anyway." His shoulders slumped. "I miss you. I miss how we used to be." I looked at my brother, the charmer who could never stand to see anyone upset. His conflict avoidance had led him to betray me just as surely as Michael's efficiency or Susan's pragmatism had. But here he was in the quiet of a library, offering an apology without excuses. It was a start, a tiny green shoot. "I miss it too, David," I said, "but we can't go back to how we were. We're not those people anymore." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, but maybe we could be something else, something new, not pretending nothing happened, but just, I don't know, brother and sister who know they messed up." It was a humble ask, not a demand for forgiveness, not a rewrite of history, just a request for a possibility. "Maybe," I said, and I meant it. "It will take time." "I've got time," he said, a small hopeful smile touching his lips. "I'm in no rush." We talked a little more then, about nothing important. The weather, a movie he'd seen. He didn't ask about the house or the money. I didn't ask about Michael or Susan. We just talked, two people remembering how to have a conversation that wasn't a transaction. When he left, I felt lighter. Not healed, but as if a weight I'd been carrying had shifted, making it easier to breathe. That evening I sat at Mom's writing desk. I took out a sheet of my own paper and a pen. I didn't write to David or to any of them. I wrote to my parents. "Dear Mom and Dad," I saved what I could. It's here with me now. The house is gone, sold to a young family with twins. I drive by sometimes. They've painted the door yellow. It looks happy. I think I understand now. You built a home with love, not with walls. And love, it turns out, is harder to split 4 ways than furniture or money. We tried to divide the indivisible, and we broke it for a while. But I'm learning. I'm watering the plant. I'm reading your letters. I'm trying to speak the language you taught us, even if it's just to myself for now. I forgive them. I think that's what you'd want most of all. Not for me to forget, but to let the bitterness go so something new can grow in its place. It might not look like the family we were, but maybe in time it can be a family again, in a new way. I love you. I miss you every day. Clara. I didn't send the letter. There was no address to send it to. I folded it and placed it in the desk drawer on top of their old letters. It felt right to put my words alongside theirs. The resolution was not a neat bow. There was no dramatic reconciliation with Michael and Susan. They remained in their cities, in their lives, a silent absence. But the war inside me was over. The conflict had been resolved through the quiet acts of saving a plant, reading a letter, accepting a flawed apology, and writing one of my own. I had my home now. Not the house on Maple Street, but the one I was building inside myself, furnished with forgiveness and watered with grace. It was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. And for the first time since that terrible click of the lock, I felt a sense of peace that was deep and real and growing. Time has a way of softening edges. It doesn't erase the lines, the cracks, the places where things broke, but it does smooth them over so you can run your fingers over the past without bleeding. A year passed. The basil plant is now a small, bushy presence on my windowsill. It's thriving. I use its leaves in my cooking, and the smell, pungent, green and alive, always brings Mom right into the room with me. It's her most persistent ghost and the kindest one. My apartment is a tapestry of the life that was and the life that is. Dad's tools are in a toolbox on my balcony. I've learned to use a few of them to fix small things. Aunt June's paintings are a window to a calmer world. I read Mom's cookbooks, trying her recipes, sometimes crying when I get them right, because it tastes so much like a Sunday afternoon in her kitchen. The cookie jar is never empty. David and I meet for coffee once a month. It's stilted at times. We talk about work, about his kids, about books. We carefully avoid the minefields of the past. But it's something. It's a connection, fragile and tended like my basil plant once was. He is trying, I am trying. Sometimes trying is enough. Michael and Susan remain a quiet space in my life. I heard through David that the sale of the house went smoothly, that they were pleased with the profit. I sometimes wonder if they ever think of me, if they ever feel a pang of regret when they drive past a similar old brick house, or if the memory of that lock clicking shut is as sharp for them as it was for me. I hope for their own sakes that it is. I hope they have found their own peace in their own way. Carrying anger towards them is a weight I chose to put down. It was too heavy, and I had too far to walk on my own. The real change, the quiet lesson in all of this, didn't come from getting what I wanted. It came from losing what I thought I couldn't live without, and discovering I could. It came from understanding that love isn't always a warm embrace. Sometimes it's a hard line you draw to protect the last sacred things. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't something you offer to someone who has apologized perfectly. Sometimes, it's a gift you give yourself so you can stop living in the cold house of the past. I visited the old house last week. The new family has made it theirs. The yellow door is cheerful. There's a tricycle on the walkway and a bright swing hanging from the maple tree Dad planted. I sat in my car for a moment just looking, and I felt nothing bad. No sharp pain, no burning injustice, just a gentle melancholy, sweet and sad like the last note of a familiar song. They are making their own memories there now. Their children will measure their heights on that doorframe. They'll spill drinks on that carpet. They'll probably one day argue over who gets what when the time comes. That is the cycle of things. Houses are just containers. It's the love you put inside them that makes them homes. That family has their love there now. And mine, my love for that place, for my parents, I carried it out with me. In the desk, the letters, the quilt, the taste of basil. I drove away without looking back. This is the story I wanted to share with you, not because it's unique but because it is. Families fracture in 1,000 quiet ways every day. Over inheritances, over misunderstandings, over words said and unsaid. The pain is real. The feeling of betrayal, of being locked out, can be the coldest feeling in the world. But here is what I learned, sitting on the porch of my own heart. You cannot control the hands that hold the keys. You can only decide what to build for yourself after the door is closed. You can choose to live in the cold of that rejection forever, or you can gather up the scattered, precious pieces that are truly yours, your memories, your dignity, your capacity to forgive, and you can build a new shelter with them. It will be different. It may be smaller. But it will be yours, and its door will always be open to you. My story doesn't have a perfect, happy ending. There is no big family reunion where we all hug and cry and everything is fixed. Life isn't a movie, but it has a real ending. One of quiet strength, of chosen peace, of a love that learned to grow in a different pot. So if you are listening to this and you are holding a key that no longer fits, or you are standing on the wrong side of a locked door, my heart is with you. Be soft with yourself. Save what you can. Water the things that seem dead, you might be surprised. And remember, a house is made of bricks and mortar. But a home is what you carry inside you. And no one, no sibling, no click of a lock can ever take that away from you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. If this video touched you, if you've ever felt a little locked out of your own life, then do me a kindness. Subscribe to my channel, Voices of Auntie Me. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below, and pass this story along to a friend who might need to hear it. Your connection turns these whispers into a chorus and reminds us all that we are never truly alone. Be kind to one another, and be kind to yourselves. Goodbye for now.